begin by sharing with you just a little bit of how I got to where I am. And 6 years ago, when I was at Marian University before coming to Butler, I was teaching undergraduate and graduate students, and I was also observing teachers, first and second year teachers in our MAT program at Marian. And it was the year that the state took over 5 schools, 4 in Indianapolis, 1 in Gary. And I remember walking out to my car, and it was a cold February, and I remember just sitting there and taking a deep breath and putting my head on the steering wheel, and then I made an urgent call to Dr. Hill, my dean at the time. And I said to him, Lyndon, I am not walking the walk. To go into a classroom, to observe teachers for 30 minutes, for 45 minutes, to be a classroom, visitor is not what I want to do if I am called to prepare pre-service teachers and graduate students in this journey. I said, this research is too important. And again, this was 6 years ago. So Marian gave me a course release. They said, we're going to give you 3-hour release, 1 semester. I asked for a large, diverse public school district. Washington Township jumped on board. And so I, with my graduate classes and my undergraduate classes, returned to Crooked Creek Elementary 2 mornings a week, and I chose 5th grade. And I sat beside Deanna Nybarger, who is my colleague and good friend, and for a semester, I literally was the first one at Crooked Creek at 6:30, 6:15 in the mornings, waiting for the door to be unlocked. I stayed 2 mornings a week, worked with the 5th grade. I made many, many mistakes. I had successful days, but it changed everything for me. And I honestly don't know what a speaker would have to say to you if they were not in the classroom. What was 1 semester, 1 school, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 6, can't remember. Now I am in my 13th semester. I told Gary, he said, can you stay afterwards? And I said, no, I have to go to IPS 60. I've got 6th grade today. And I was up at 6:30 making my lesson plans this morning. So this research I'm going to share with you in this short period of time is not out of a lab or a textbook. It is what we are implementing every single day. I am seeing shifts in kids that I get tears in my eyes. I told Beth, I'm so tired, I'll cry over anything today. Yesterday I was in Jasper, Indiana, and I saw this district share and come to life with this work. It has been an honor to sit beside the Indiana Department of Education and to create with Dr. Brandy Oliver, my colleague, the new social and emotional learning competencies for our state. We were very intentional with these competencies because what we understand is that attachment is the carrier of all development, neurobiologically. And I used to think that connection and building relationships was great, but I had no idea the implications for child brain development and our stress response systems. The research today across our country is sharing that our nation's new learning disability is anxiety. And we are seeing 27 to 33% of students in general education classrooms walking in with significant anxiety. As my daughter Sarah says, Mom, they are rough. And they are rough. These kids are walking in and they are dysregulated. And so this morning, what I am talking with you about is not a program. There are fabulous programs that we as districts spend thousands of dollars on. I love zones of regulation. I love Leader in Me, developmental design, responsive classroom. And I'm going to, oh good, there's my, I always, you guys know who have heard me speak, I forget my slides. What I'm talking about today is a framework, and I want to be very clear about this. What I am seeing and what educators are sharing with me is that this framework has 1,000 faces. How it looks in Noblesville, how it looks in Jasper, how it looks in IPS, how it looks in Lawrence or Pike is based on leadership, and it's based on how we implement the 4 legs of this framework. And truly, this is so fast this morning. I'm going to go over these 4 legs. And what we understand is that this framework is about regulation, and it's about deepening and strengthening connections. And it's also about teaching our students about their neuroanatomy. We know that when kids come in rough and dysregulated, they are in a pattern of what we call a survival brain state. And in a survival brain state, that brain is functioning in lower brain regions. It is functioning from sensory and emotional levels, and it cannot learn. Neurobiologically, when any of us are in a chronic state of survival, we cannot learn. We can't even tap into cognition. So this framework today is about regulation. All chronic behavioral issues are regulation issues. All regulation issues are based in our physiology. And trauma and adversity are physiological. They are not psychological. They're held in the brain and they are held in the body. How many of you are very familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experience study? How many of you have not heard of that study? Okay, so I want to briefly go over that this morning. And I apologize for skipping around slides, but this is what I do best. So let me share with you what we are learning and learning quickly. And for me, as a mom, if I had known this research with my 3 children, if I had known this, I would have parented differently. This is not just about educators. This is about all of us. Put your hands on your forehead right now. Just go ahead. It feels nice. Put some pressure up there right under your eyebrows. What part of the brain is this? This is the frontal lobe. This is the prefrontal cortex, and it finishes developing at about what age? Just shout it out. Yeah, so we've been told 25 for a long time, but what research is sharing with us now is this part of the brain oftentimes is delayed and compromised because of adversity and trauma, and we're seeing development happen later and later, late 20s and early 30s. And so what we know is this is where we do life and this is where we do school. These are the executive functions we need to make decisions, to emotionally regulate, to have strong working memory, to discern, to understand consequences based on choices. And so this part of the brain, when it is offline, it does not get an oxygenated glucose blood flow because you have another area of the brain in what Dr. Joseph Ledoux, and this is new research because I've been talking about the amygdala for the last 3 years, but I want to share with you more correctly, it's likened to a defensive survival circuit. And any of us in a chronic state of stress have an activation in this limbic system, which is the amygdala, both hemispheres. And when it's activated and it's fireworking, that's a word, this frontal lobe goes offline. And what we understand is that kids who come in with significant adversity, and these, you know those students in your district, these are kids who are walking in rough and dysregulated, and they are carrying in significant adversity and trauma. And I'm trying to stay away from the word trauma because adversity, I feel, is more appropriate because it happens on a continuum. In the late 1990s, this study was an accidental study, and it was the largest public health study until the newest study in 2017, where the data was just released. Robert Onda and Vince Felitti came together from the CDC's and Kaiser Permanente, and they found that when they asked adults these 10 questions, and now we know there are 15 to 20 indicators. There are so many more adversities than the original study shared. When they asked these adults, here is what they discovered. The higher your ACE score, the higher the dose-response relationship and correlation to your emotional and mental and physiological health outcomes. This is about all of us. This is about our ACEs. And I am learning just this week There is not a person in this room this morning that has not walked in with our own adversities. ACEs are common. Adverse childhood experiences are common, and they cross all socioeconomic, all racial, and all ethnic boundaries. Let me just share a few of them, and I'm going to bump up to the new study, because this was in the late 1990s. We have a whole new arena of ACEs, and here's why this is significant. Our kids who walk in to our district who are carrying 4 or more adversities are 32.6 times more likely to have behavioral and academic challenges. And for me as an educator, I need to know that. I need to understand the implications of this, because this framework is not about fixing a kid. This framework is about priming the brain for learning. It's meeting kids in brain development, not academically. It's about greeting these children the minute they come into a school or a classroom and understanding that we've got to attune and attend to their brain state. And as a superintendent, you are called to do the same thing with the educators in your district. All of the strategies I'm going to share in this tiny amount of time are strategies that you can implement with educators in your district. Because, as I said, these ACEs are about all of us. Let me go through them. If you personally, and just kind of tally up in your mind, you don't have to write anything down, but just think about your own. If you grew up in an environment between birth and 18 where there was a separation or divorce of someone you cared for, give yourself an ACE. If you grew up in an environment where there was someone that you loved who was struggling with mental illness, anxiety, depression, give yourself an ACE. If you grew up in an environment where there was alcoholism or addiction, give yourself an ACE. Poverty is an ACE, growing up in poverty. Neglect is a very significant ACE, because neglect means that the brain is not getting the directions and instructions it needs to thrive and to have well-being, because our brains are social organs. That's why attachment drives all development. So neglect crosses all socioeconomic, all racial, and all ethnic boundaries. It's not about a certain population. Growing up in an environment where a parent has been incarcerated or a caregiver has been incarcerated is another ACE. Domestic violence is an ACE. Emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all ACEs. Perceiving chronic social rejection or humiliation is another ACE. Growing up with someone that you care for that has died is another ACE. And in the new data, and I have a slide for this, but I'm going so fast, I don't want to take, I've got a clipboard somewhere in here. We know that the multiracial population has been identified as a new ACE, a vulnerable population. Our LGBTQ population has been identified in a new study as a new ACE. We know that many of the students in our district are spending just incredible amounts of time on screens, social media, without buffers. They don't have boundaries or structure. That's an adversity. How many of you have students in your district that have responsibilities that they should never have at the ages they have them? Parentification and young carers, that's an ACE. And what has not been identified, but I see it everywhere I go, our children and youth of color who are being over-identified and disproportionately punished in our schools is an adversity of this population. And so we understand today that the neurobiology, you can't argue. Our brains develop from the back, the brainstem, to the prefrontal cortex. And many of our kids are living inside that parietal brain where they don't have the functioning of problem solving or being creative or thinking about, they don't even know what a pause is. Yesterday in Jasper, I was sharing with the district that we are so patient when it comes to teaching a child how to read or how to ride a bike or how to swim. We take surface area math problems and we sit with a kid and we work them out step by step. But when it comes to behaviors that really are invisible, we punish. And traditional discipline works the best with the kids who need it the least. It doesn't work with kids who come in carrying in these chronic adversities. But the resiliency research just gets me out of bed and hopeful every morning. And that resiliency research shares that one healthy connection, an adult caregiver who is emotionally available and consistently present, who is there to listen, trumps the adversity that a child experiences, the toxicity of that environment every day. And there is well-being.